everybody, welcome to Yoga in My Living Room. Today I'm going to take you through about an hour-long sequence that is meant to build awareness, strength, stability, and control in the hip muscles. For this practice, you are going to need some props today, and I'm going to walk you through what props you're going to need exactly as we go through the practice, because the props that you're going to need are actually going to depend entirely on where your strength is right now. But I would suggest first starting with a book. If you've got a yoga block, that's great. Also, I've got a recycling bin just turned upside down, so something to start stacking my props a little bit higher. Maybe this is a stack of books, maybe you have a piano bench. So just grab a few things that you might need, and then as we go along, you may need to hit the pause button and go and grab something else. Okay, so to start our practice today, we're going to begin with a little game. And what you're going to need is either a book that you preferably don't care about too much because it might be toppling over, or a yoga block. I'll use the book just so that you can see that you really don't need the proper props to do this. So the point of this game is to balance the book on the top of your foot while you're lying on your back, and to see if you can roll onto your stomach. So you're going to come down onto your back, place the book or your block on the top of your foot, and just before I start to try to roll over onto my stomach, I'm just going to start with some little movements of my leg, just so that I can begin to form that connection with my brain, so that I can start to learn, okay, how much room do I have to move my foot, my hip, my knee, such that the book doesn't fall off? This is also a really great warm-up for the practice that we're going to be doing today, because I'm starting to explore some active range of motion through my hip, through my knee, through my ankle. And I find that the book is actually a little bit easier than the yoga block, because there seems to be a little bit more friction between the book and the sole of my foot to help sort of keep it in place even at more angles of inclination. So maybe a book is a good place to start for this activity, as you may find more success. Okay, so I'm starting to feel a little bit more warmed up. I'm going to try to start making my way onto my stomach. And what I'm first going to do is allow the opposite hip to fall down, the knee to fall to the ground, so that I can start to maneuver my body in space. Now, as you can see, I'm going to have to start turning at my hip so that I can keep my foot pointing straight up to the ceiling. And then I'm going to allow my thigh to come down to the ground. Oh. And there we go. Okay, and now I need to get back onto my back, still with the book resting on my foot. So I'm going to see, okay, I'm going to lift my foot up first. Need to start twisting at my hip, rotating it around. And there we go. Okay, so you can play around with this if you need to hit pause so that you give yourself a little bit more of a chance. Maybe you didn't find success on the first try. I'm going to do the block on my opposite foot. This is a light sort of foam block, and I find that it's actually a lot harder when the block is sort of lighter, like a cork block is probably easier to do this, because I find the weight just gives your foot a little bit more proprioception to work with, and a little bit more friction on the interface of your foot. So I'm probably going to have a lot less success with this side, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, so even just moving around, I can feel that it's a lot harder for me, even just to move my leg while keeping the block balanced. Yeah, I'm already feeling like I don't know how I'm going to get onto my stomach with this, but that's okay. I imagine you can sort of play around with this. There's probably all sorts of different objects you can use around your home and figure out, okay, how can I balance this object on my foot and try to roll over. All right, I'm going to give this one more try, and then I might switch back to the book. So I'm curious to know how this goes for you and what kind of object you're using. So maybe you find that like a hardcover book, something that's a little shiny on the surface, is a little bit easier because of the friction it provides, but let me know how this goes. All right, here we go. Whoa. Or maybe as a warm-up, you start with something a little easier and then progress to something that you're finding a little bit harder, because I can feel a lot more muscular engagement now that I'm using something that's harder to control, because I really have to figure out, okay, how can I keep my foot totally still while moving still at the hip joint so that I can roll onto my stomach. There we go. Oh, so close. All right. Okay, let's call that that quits for now, but play around with this, and I think this is a great game that you can try with kids as well, because I think they would get a lot of enjoyment out of this. Okay, so we're going to come on to hands and knees, tabletop position, and you're going to grab a hold of your prop on the way, and you're going to place the prop on the back of your hip, so not on your low spine, but a little bit further down. And we're going to take some fire hydrants here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift my left knee and start to send it out towards the side. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to isolate the movement to the hip joint only. So rather than rotating the pelvis backwards to lift my leg higher. So you're going to see that the book will probably either fall off, or you might even just find that it's sliding a little bit to the side. So really trying to avoid that movement and just focusing on the movement of the hip. And you might actually notice that you're exploring a lot less movement, a lot less range of motion than you may feel like you have the ability to express if you were to start allowing the pelvis to rotate as well. Okay, now I'm going to add on to this. So as I let my left knee come out to the side, I'm going to straighten my leg and then bend it again and lower it back down. Let's do about 6 of these. And I can feel my pelvis starting to rotate a little bit. So I'm going to try to control that movement as much as I can. Okay, last one here. Okay, and you can take the book down. I'm just going to move facing the camera so that you can see what we're going to do next. So now I'm going to send my left foot straight out to the side. I'm going to plant the whole footprint down on the ground. My right hand will stay planted under the shoulder. As I breathe in, I'm going to reach my left arm up to the ceiling. Gaze can follow. And on the exhale, I'm going to sweep my fingertips underneath my body to bring some rotation into the spine. So again, it's an inhale to lift up, reach, and an exhale to sweep. Let's do 3 more like that. Okay, last one here. And when you've finished, you're going to keep your legs as they are. Hands will come up into a kneeling position. I'm going to allow my right hand to plant underneath my shoulder. If the ground feels really far away, I can grab a book or a block or some kind of prop for support. My left hand is going to come to my hip. And you're going to notice that you're probably starting to lean forward. You're probably starting to flex at your bottom hip. So we're going to gently press the hips forward in space as I squeeze my glutes to help find some extension through the hips. I'm going to come onto the ball of the left foot, the tip of the toe, and when I feel steady, I'm going to start to lift my left leg up off the ground. Continuing to drive the hips forward in space, squeezing the glutes, I'm going to lift my left arm up. And I'm going to start to get lighter in my right hand. Maybe your pose is right here. Maybe you stay. Or maybe you really engage through your core and see if you can lift the right hand up off the ground as well. This is a balancing act. Allow your body to calibrate. Okay, 3 more breaths here. And then when you're ready, you can plant the hand down first, lower the foot, and we'll come all the way up. Okay, we'll come back into our tabletop position. We're going to try that same sequence on the second side, but before we jump right into the fire hydrants on the second side, just allow your spine to move a little bit in a way that feels good. So these can be cat-cow tilts or maybe something totally different. Okay, and when you're ready, you're going to go ahead and grab your prop, place it back onto the back of your pelvis for your feedback, and we'll start with the fire hydrants on the right leg. And a little cue that I like to use for myself as I go through this is I try to think of the bottom of my right hip continuing to point down towards the ground, even though I'm lifting the top side of my right hip up. So as much as I'm lifting the leg, I'm trying to press the right side of the hip down towards the ground to really remind myself that it's only the hip joint I'm moving at. Okay, let's go ahead and add to the movement. So now as we reach out to the side with the right leg, we'll straighten the leg, rebend it, and lower. Let's do 6 more like that. I find it's very helpful to use my exhale with the straighten. That's when we've got the maximum load on the right outer hip. Use that natural bracing of the core on the exhale to help us find success. Yeah, I've lost count, but let's do this last one here. Okay, I'm going to move the prop out of the way. I'm going to turn around. You can stay as you are. We'll send the right foot out to the side, plant the footprint. This time, let's breathe in as we reach the right arm up. And on the exhale, find rotation of the spine. Again, inhale. And breathe out. 2 more like that. Okay. And we're coming back to center. You may want to grab a hold of one of your props along the way as we'll come up into our half kneeling position. I'm going to set my left hand down on the block beside me, press the hips forward in space, engage the glutes, come onto the ball of the right foot, the tip of the toe, and then use the muscles in the outer hip to start to lift the leg. Right arm can come up, getting lighter in the left fingertips, and maybe eventually lifting that hand. So you can see I'm having a lot more difficulty on this side. This is a common theme for me, finding more weakness, more difficulty on my left side than my right. Most of us have a weaker side. That's okay. Okay, and then we'll lower the leg. And we'll get rid of the block. And we can come back into our table. And once again, just give your spine a little bit of a wiggle, a little bit of a shimmy, just to let that exercise go. Okay, now let's come into a forearm plank. So I'm going to allow my forearms to come down onto the ground. I like to keep my thumbs and my index fingers together, but they can be separate if you prefer that. I'm going to tuck my toes and lift my legs up off the ground. So what we're thinking about here is we're really pushing the forearms down into the ground so we can engage the muscles in the upper back. So rather than just kind of like sagging down and letting the shoulders, the chest, the chin droop, we're thinking about actively pushing the ground away. My glutes are engaged, my core is engaged, so there's a little bit of a lift through my low belly rather than sagging through the lower side of my body. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow my right knee to drop down towards the ground. I'm going to lower my left knee. I'm going to pick up the right and pick up the left. And we'll do that again. So drop the right, drop the left, pick up the right, pick up the left. So let's keep going in this circular sort of motion. Now, if you're starting to feel fatigued, you can always drop the knees and work from your low plank position. There's a lot of work to be done here. But if you're still feeling like the energy is good and core is engaged, then we'll keep going. And we'll switch sides. So let the left knee drop, right knee drop, left knee up, right knee up. Keep going. Let's do 3 more. Okay, last one here. And we'll let the whole body come all the way down. And you can plant your forehead onto your hands. You'll bend your knees and just take some gentle windshield wipers at the shins. Okay, let's lower the shins down to the ground. Okay, let's bring the arms down alongside the body. And I'm going to think about engaging my back body. So I'm going to lift my shoulders away from the ground. I'm going to hover my arms up off the ground. I'm going to squeeze my glutes, squeeze all the muscles in the back of my body to start to lift all of my limbs up off the ground. Now from here, I'm going to start to pulse my body into a more lifted position. But rather than just sort of flopping around willy-nilly using momentum to lift, I'm going to think more so about using all the muscles in the back of my body to lift a little higher, and then let that go just 10% and lower. Let's do about 6 more. Okay, last one here, make it count. And we'll lower all the way down. I'm gonna plant my hands under my shoulders, tuck my toes, and through table or plank, let's make our way back to our first downward facing dog. Okay, on your next breath in, let's come high on the toes and bend the knees. And we'll use the exhale to tiptoe the way between your hands. You'll use a breath in, find a long spine, halfway lift, and on the exhale, just fold. You'll ground through the feet, inhale, rise all the way up, hands come up, gaze can follow, and on the exhale, we'll rest the hands. So I was teaching my mom and dad over Zoom the other day, and my mom was asking me about squats and knees going over the toes. And she said that she was always taught to squat with the knees in line with the ankles and sending the bum back in space. And this is a perfectly good way to squat, but we have other options when we squat as well. So the knees can go to the forefoot, the knees can even go way past the toes. So we've got lots of different options. And I like to think of these as options because they each accomplish something a little bit different. So let's actually just jump right into that and see how that feels in our body. So I'm going to start with about a hip width stance in my feet. And I'm going to start to squat, thinking about not letting my knees go past my ankles at all. So I'm going to have to send my bum way back in space in order to accomplish that goal. And for me, as I go through this movement, I really notice that my glutes are engaged, particularly at the bottom of the squat as I come up and drive through my heels. So see if you can notice that connection, the heel to glute connection. Okay. Now I'm going to keep going, but this time I'm going to let my knees come a little bit past my ankles, not quite past my toes. And to me, this feels sort of like a really natural way to squat. If I were to grab a kettlebell or a dumbbell and try to squat, I would probably just naturally fall into this movement pattern. I'm noticing that the weight seems very evenly distributed in my forefoot. And I'm noticing that I can get good engagement through my glutes and also my quads in this movement pattern. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going, but this time I'm going to let my knees come out over my toes. Not way past my toes, but just sort of knees in line with my toes as I look down. And what I immediately notice is there's a lot more activity in the lower part of my quads. So I'm feeling the front of my legs starting to get more fatigued, and my glutes are they're still engaged, but I'm starting to notice that they're really not bearing the brunt of the load right now. Okay, now I'm going to exaggerate even more. So I'm going to try to squat and really dorsiflex my ankles, trying to let my knees come way out past my toes. And I notice immediately that I have a tendency to want to drop my hips a lot lower as I do this, almost as if I was going to go down into a deep squat. Okay, now let's just play around with this. So I'm going to do squat knees over the ankles, squat knees way past the toes, squat in the forefoot, and I'm just going to sort of explore these different options and just kind of focus on what's happening in my body. Where do I notice the work? Okay, and we'll come up to stand. For the next part of this practice, what we're going to do is we're going to start to work on engaging the glutes in single-legged work and also more in a stride stance, so like a lunge. What you're going to need for this is either the yoga block, a stack of books, and you're also going to need something that stacks a little bit higher. So you could use a bench or a chair. I've got a recycling bin here that I've turned upside down, so you can hit pause if you need and go and grab something that will work. Now, how high you need this to be is going to completely depend on your level. So what you might need to do, it might take a little bit of trial and error to find that perfect level. We're going to start with the lunge. So what you're going to do is you're going to come into a lunge position with your back knee onto the top of either your yoga block or your recycling bin, or however high you need it to be for the next part of this exercise. And like I said, it will take a bit of trial and error. So what I'd like you to do is find a nice hip width stance so that you're not too much on a tightrope. We'll bring the hands to the hips. And we're going to lift and lower the back knee with our breath. So I like an exhale to lift the knee. So I'm going to take a breath in first. And on the exhale, I'm going to lift the knee. And then we'll go again. So inhale, lower, and exhale, lift. And I'm going to keep going like this. And what I'm really trying to think about right now is how can I engage my right outer hip? Okay, so I'm thinking about driving my right heel down into the ground as I come up to find that heel to glute connection. And I'm also trying to think about keeping a level pelvis. So what you might notice is as you're dropping down, do you get to a point where you lose the control and the left side of your pelvis starts to drop so that the knee can come down? Okay, so we're really thinking about controlling the eccentric, controlling the lowering portion of the movement all the way down. And let's do 5 more. Okay, and then we can come to stand and just let that go. And we'll go right into the second side. Now for me, like I mentioned earlier in class, I have a lot of weakness on my left hip that I've been trying to address. So you might actually find that you need a different level on the second side. So maybe you need a block and a book, or maybe you need some extra supports so that you can continue to find that level pelvis as we go through the movement. So we're going to come into our lunge on the second side. I like to start at the lower portion of the lunge so that I can line the prop up where I need it. I'm going to bring my hands to my hips. I'm going to think this time about the outer left hip, and I'm going to squeeze through those muscles to come up. So I'm really thinking about controlling the way down, and then finding a little bit of pop, a little bit of spring on the way up. Probably using my exhale at the hardest part of the movement, so the lift back up. Notice any tendency you have to drop. Try to keep that level pelvis. We're also thinking, I should have mentioned this on the first side about the front knee. If the knee is starting to cave in as we go down, we're going to need more stability, more support from the outer hip to keep our knee in good alignment as we're going down. Okay, let's do 4 more. Okay, and we'll come to stand. Let's do that whole sequence again, and we'll go back to the first side. So let's say, we'll do 10 more on either side. Okay, so what I was noticing is on the second set, I was having to spend more effort, more control, thinking, okay, how can I keep my front knee in alignment? How can I keep the knee from caving in? And that's some of that weakness on my left side that's showing up. So always a good idea to pay attention. What's happening in my body? What are my lowest common denominators? What do I need to address in my practice? This next exercise is an activation exercise for the gluteus medius muscle. So the muscle on the outside of the hip that's really controlling our hip, helping us find stability when we're in a single-legged work. So this is a really important muscle because when you think about just like normally walking around the town or around your house or walking up and down the stairs, there's a huge portion of the gait cycle or ascending and descending the stairs where we're only on one leg. So we want to really find a lot of stability in our pelvis so that we can stay strong in our hips during everyday life. So for this exercise, you're going to grab either a book or a block, and we're going to start by standing on the book. So make sure it's a book that you're comfortable to stand on. And I'm going to start with my right foot up on the block. And I'm going to bring my hands to my hips so that I notice where is my pelvis in space? When is it level? And I'm just going to let my left leg float. So the left leg can just kind of be doing whatever we want here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to allow the left side of my pelvis to drop. So I'm going to notice that the right side of my hip comes out to the side. And then I'm going to try to do the opposite of that. So I'm going to correct it. I'm going to hug in through the outer side of my hip to bring my hips back up to level. Okay, so I'm going to show you that again. So the left side of the pelvis is going to drop, right outer hip comes out to the side, and then I'm going to hug in through that side of the hip to come back to center. So we'll keep going like this. And what you might notice is, are you lifting the left side of your pelvis with the outer hip? Or are you hiking your entire body? So are you starting to side flex through the spine? We're not looking for that motion, okay? We're not looking to come past level, so we're not looking to lift the left hip up. We're just looking to come back to level and then dropping it down. And I find, for me, I'm somebody who has a lot of range of motion at my joints, and it's really easy for me to just drop down into quite a deep range of motion at the hip. But I'm not going to think about, can I do this movement expressing a huge range of motion? Instead, I'm going to think more about finding a small range of motion, but really controlling that range and really trying to find strength on both the lifting portion of the movement, but also on the lowering portion of the movement. So both the concentric and the eccentric portions of the movement. And this is a little beast of an exercise because as you start, you're like, yeah, it doesn't feel like the whole lot is going on. And then once you do lots of reps, it's like, oh my God, like you really start feeling the load on the hip. So let's try the second side. Already I notice it's my left side. I'm a lot less smooth, a lot less controlled on this side. It's a lot more weakness, underlying weakness to address. I'm even having a harder time balancing, which is interesting because it's just going to show me that when I don't have that underlying, that baseline strength controlling my hip, I'm a lot less balanced. So maybe I'm more likely to slip and fall when I'm standing on the left side of my leg. So these are things that I really want to start to address in my practice so that I can set my whole life up for success. Trying to prevent any injuries. Okay. So now we're going to up-level the movement and start to add more load into the outer hip. If you felt like in this previous exercise, like this was perfectly at your level and it was hard and you were building strength from there, I want you to stay with that exercise. But if you're feeling like you're needing a little bit more, then you're going to try this. So using your block on its highest setting, or alternatively, you can also use a table or the side of the counter or the side of your bed or something else to rest your hands on. I'm actually going to show you this with the block and the recycling bin so that I can have it a little propped higher up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my hands on the block, and I'm going to lean some of my body weight into this. I'm going to try to find a neutral spine, so I'm going to bring a little bit of a bend into my knees. And I'm going to go ahead and lift my left foot up off the ground. Now I'm going to focus right now on my pelvis. So right now the right and the left side of my hips are level. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow, like we did when we were standing, I'm going to allow the left side of my pelvis to drop. The right side of my hip is going to come out to the side. It might be hard to see in the video, but if you're following along and you've done the first exercise, I think this will feel fairly intuitive. And then I'm going to use the muscles in my right outer hip to lift my pelvis back up to level. Whew. So once again, we're not hiking the hip up high, okay? We're not going past neutral. It's just a little lower of the left hip, and then lift back up to neutral. I'm going to do 10 of these. And then I'm going to switch sides. Okay, and then we'll come to stand and let that go. Okay, so the next exercise we're going to do is a progression of something called a shrimp squat. And a shrimp squat is a single-legged squat where we're actually holding the floating leg. And it's quite a challenging movement, but we can regress the movement so that we can all find a version of it where we can start to build strength. So this is the part of the practice where you're going to need probably quite a stack of blocks. I was teaching this with my mom and dad, and my dad kind of laughed at me when I said you could try it with a blocks stacked up high, and he said, I think I'll need quite a high stack of books. Once again, this will be a bit of trial and error to find the right stack that's going to work for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a yoga block, and I'm going to plant it on its highest setting. And I'm going to step with my right foot a little bit, kind of about 1 block's width to the side and a little further out in front of the block. I'm going to go ahead and grab my knee with my opposite hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend at my knee, and you're going to see my knee is going to come way out past my ankle until my back knee can touch the block. So I'm actually going to need to get a little closer to the block. There we go, in order to do this. So I'm going to lower my back knee down to the block, and then I'm going to come on back up. And what I'm really trying to focus on here is alignment of the hips, so the front knee isn't caving in. It's staying hugging out, strength in the outer hip. I'm trying to think, okay, do I need to rotate my whole pelvis? Does the whole pelvis need to drop? If so, I'm going to need to stack, create a higher stack so that I can stay in good alignment this entire time. Okay, so let's try about 10 of these. Okay, and then we'll come to stand, and you can just shake that out as we go to the second side. So now I'm coming onto my left side, which is a little bit weaker, so we'll see how I'm doing today. I might need to add an extra book on top of this. so that I can find success and make sure that I'm staying in really good alignment the entire time, keeping a level pelvis. But we'll see how this goes. Well, it's a bit of a balancing act as well. Sometimes it's helpful to have the opposite arm come out for support. And it's interesting, sometimes I find with this pattern, with this squat pattern in particular, it takes me a few reps just to start to get going and to find that movement pattern. And then I find, okay, I've got it. So sometimes on the first two, I can't quite get my knee all the way down. I feel a little bit more wobbly. I'm noticing the right side of my pelvis starting to drop. And then as I give my brain just a few reps to start calibrating the movement, I start finding more success. Okay, let's do this again. 10 more on either side. I'm going to do two extra on this side because this is a weak side for me, so I got to give myself a little bit more. Okay, so this is obviously a new movement pattern for me. You can see that I'm still having a hard time balancing. It's taking me a lot of effort to focus on keeping everything in control, keeping the the left outer hip engaged as I go through the movement. So it's just fun. It's something to work on, and you can play around with that. Let's push all of the props aside. So we're done with those for now. We've got one more exercise that we're going to do standing, and then we're going to take it down to the ground for a nice little stretch. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sort of a dynamic airplane pose. And what I want us to really focus on as we go through this movement is the strength, the stability, and the control we've been building all class in our outer hips. So let's come into just an easy standing position. I'm going to start on my right leg because that's my better side. So just to develop the movement pattern first before I go over to the weaker side. I'm going to stand on one leg. I'm going to lift my left leg up and I'm going to bring my hands to my hips. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick my left leg out and then I'm going to lean my chest forward and kick my left leg back. Okay, so fairly simple movement. It's just a kick and a kick. Now what I'm thinking about here is a lot of things. I'm thinking about my right outer hip to begin with. Is it engaged? Is it engaged enough that my right thigh is staying in alignment over my foot, or is it starting to cave inwards? Is it making me lose my balance? I'm also thinking about the left side of my pelvis. So as I go back and kick back, am I getting lazy and am I starting to rotate my whole body towards the other side of the room? So am I starting to lift my left hip up past my right, or am I keeping my pelvis pointing straight down and level? Okay, let's do 2 more little kicks, and then we're going to stay in the airplane pose. So here we go. This time as I go back and I'm going to kick, I'm going to stay. Pelvis is level, left side of the hip is dropping in line with the right. I can keep as much a bend in my standing leg as I need to feel strong and engaged. I'm going to gently pull my heart space forward so I'm lengthened through the whole spine. Maybe I reach the arms out. Let's stay here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'll let myself come up to stand and rest. Okay, so I actually really feel that on the side of my calf because it was really kind of gripping the entire time to keep me balanced on the leg. So now we're going to try that on the second side. So this time I'm going to stand on my left leg, notice my pelvis, try to keep it level, and I'm just going to start with a really simple kick, kick. Need to make sure I don't kick my dog. Stand a little further forward. Okay, let's do 3 more, and then we'll find our airplane. Okay, last kick in front. This time let's stay here. Watch that the right side isn't lifting. Keep it hugging down. Keep lifting long. Reach the spine line. Maybe fly the arms. We'll stay here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's come to stand. Okay, so I'm starting to feel quite fatigued in my outer hips, and hopefully you are too. Now let's take a stretch for the outer hips. So let's come right down to a seat. I'm going to bring my feet out in front of me, and just before I go into the stretch, I'm just going to take some gentle windshield wipers side to side. Okay, I'm going to come back up to center. I'm going to bring my feet a little further out in front of me. I'm going to cross my right heel over my left thigh, and I'm going to slide my left heel closer in towards my bum. So I'm closing the distance between my belly and my thigh, just until I start to feel a nice stretch in the right outer hip. So the outer hip of the leg that is crossed over the other. Just going to let my neck, my head drop here. I'm going to close my eyes. And I'll take some nice breaths right here. That's Curtis groaning over there. He's also enjoying his stretch. Okay, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to give my legs a little shake between sides. And then I'll find the second side. All right, so that's all I've got planned for today. So please reach out if you have any questions about anything that we practiced today, or if you have any ideas that you'd like me to do in a future video, just let me know. Thanks, everyone.